Hello and welcome to another video tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to cover the coding part of this templating system. So please make sure you watch this video first, and then you come over to this tutorial that I'm recording right now. So basically, just to recap very quickly, we discussed how template system could benefit our apps, in particular different pages or views, so that we don't have to have um, you know wrappers and guards and all the other non-component based logics, um, and basically the like centralizing everything to do with the page look and feel. So if you want to, so for instance, we have this template right now. It's called default because there is just one template. You can, but you can be very specific with template names and just name them whatever you feel is the right name. Um, so as a result of the very first video I did, so many of you reached out to me through GitHub, and some of you just come across my code and didn't even watch the video. So thank you for those, and thank you for being here. So let's get started. So the very first thing I want to mention here is that templating systems are nothing but regular components, basically. So um, and by regular components, I mean they're just literally, so template itself is just a component and nothing. It's literally nothing other than a like a regular component. But its sole purpose is to have a placeholder in our page, like different placeholders and stuff, where it's going to lay out different components for us without us needed to lay them the way we want to, and like having different styling, positioning, and all of that stuff, guards, and all that kind of stuff, doing them manually specifically. So that's the whole purpose of having a template system, um, for your React application, whether it's React or even a Next.js, uh, because at the end of the day, they are all just React, and they'll get compiled down to regular HTML. So let's get started. Enough of talking. This is the repository I have set up for the code I have prepared. At the time of the recording, there is a branch called template-region, and in this branch, I have the code prepared. Now, if we switch over to this branch, you can see that there was like 4 commits, and it was done over a month ago. Like today is the 20th of September, 2022, and this was done on the 19th, so just over a month ago, actually. And apologies if I didn't do this actually much sooner or earlier. So I've just found a time to do it right now. So let's get started. So folder structure wise, let's go to the code itself. I'm just going to get rid of this. So make sure you watch this first. So I'll get rid of that, and we have 2 tabs: one to host our app, and one for the GitHub repository. And I have VS Code also prepared. So I'm going to collapse this. We don't need it. It is running actually in the background. If I go to here, I could just drag it up to expand and collapse. So if I go to the file, to the folder structures, here we have components, constants, helpers, styles, templates, types, and views. But actually, in the original branch, obviously the branch wouldn't be available anymore once I'm done with this tutorial. But I could leave it. But actually, there is no point leaving it on because the two branches, the main and that will be the same exact code. So I don't know. I'll figure out something. But for time being, basically, if we compare the folder structures and we dive into the source directory, so this source, there's only one folder called styles. So that's what it was done prior to preparing the code for this tutorial. And if we head over to our VS Code, we can see that we got these bunch of new folders added. So we have, apart from the styles, we now have components, constants, helpers, templates, types, and views. So let's just go over each and every one of them one by one. So we now have element component and a region. The purpose of element component is that it helps us eliminate the need for having manual guarding um, around our wrapper components or any component basically. So that would help us. If you look at the code itself, I'll go into it in a bit. But if we go to the there is one index, and this is how I stick with every component, like folder and file structure wise. So every component has an index and has style.module.scss. So if you think of this element component, it is nothing but if we were to just let's say JavaScript. If we were to not have the element component, then what it would look like, we would have with the div, class name, I don't know, some class name, div, and then like the children. So children could be text, could be anything, really, it doesn't really matter at this stage. But what this element component does is, if you were to have some guards around this that says, I don't know, something like, maybe show this div when a value is true. Let's say we have a constant that says, I don't know, something along the lines of to display. Maybe display to members, if I could spell it right, members only, right? And by default, this is false, maybe. Actually, I need to change this to let. But there might be something driving from the API that says that's going to turn this to true. So let's say somewhere down the line, we are reassigning that to true. Now we need to have that guard around this div, and that div, we don't want this div to be displayed for security reasons. We don't want it to be displayed. First of all, if you want it to be like very strict and about the showing about dumping a piece of code in the DOM in the document object model, we have to deal with them in the server side. But let's say if you want to have it's the piece of the visual aspects of it is not really important whether a non-member sees it, and you just want to guard it from a UX point of view. Maybe you could stick a guard around it. Maybe let's say, I don't know, if displayed member is shown. This is not a React file. That's why it's bugging us about this red line. But let's say if we had a guard uh, let's say this was in React. We would not want to have an early return something along the lines of if this is not true, so opposite, then return null, right? So this is how we do it. Otherwise, just return this, right? So this is how we usually do it in the React world. Um, and like, so to eliminate the need for this, and every time we create a new component, we can simply replace all of this, like literally even this, and just do if we import the element component. Let's say we have an element component somewhere. So if we change this to element now, element component, we can now there is now a prop that gives us the ability, and the prop is hidden. So by default is false because we don't want to be hidden by default. Now if you pass this to this, that's going to raise a flag to this component, to this very core component, I would say. And then that would basically return, like replaces the entire component in the DOM with simply null, which is nothing. Like it would return nothing basically. That's the whole purpose of this element component, and that's not the only purpose. Like there is other purposes. So let's say there is this class name. You know how we do things, how we merged and combined class names, CSS class names in React, because React only allows singular like string, and if like for us to be able to combine multiple class names based on falsy, truthy, like Boolean values, we have to use something called there is a good third-party npm package that everyone tends to stick with because it's just very intuitive, and I have been using it myself for quite some time. But I honestly like I have nothing to say against these guys. They did a like brilliant job. But what I noticed was that every time I'm creating components, I need to put this. I need to put these class names everywhere. So if we go back to the Chrome and we type in npm class names, and we can see I've visited before. So explore readme. So there is this. I don't know where the code is gone. Um, class names. Interesting. If you go to, yeah, so if you look at documentation, you can see you can do add class name like this, so multiple strings, and it becomes like singular, and like it's single string, followed by space in between, obviously, and you can read up the documentation, and it's really really good to get started and to get up and running. But basically, what I noticed was that every time I was doing something in my React components, I was like literally copying pasting the same thing over and over again. I had to put all of these logics in basically. So I came up with this helper method myself, and it has the support of displaying some class name, like attaching that class name to the DOM if it's true, something is true, right? So we don't need to separate the true falsy like with the comma. You can just put them in line, and it like literally the join classes helper method is as simple as it takes everything as an array, um, right? And it treats every single one on its own, right? So this is how it does it. We don't need to go crazy, and again, I have nothing against these guys, but we don't need to like overcomplicate things in a sense, if it makes sense what I'm saying. So that's another purpose of having class name prop. we obviously covered hidden. Now there is this invisible, and there is this invisible prop, which is similar to hidden, but not rather than returning null in the DOM, it returns the component, but it just doesn't like visually like displays it, like shows it. Similar to the CSS property of invisible. So we have something in if I go to the um, if I go here and let's say visibility, we can say hidden, right? So the where did it go? Visibility hidden. You can see the main is there, but like from visual aspects of it, it's not there to the user. So document object model has it, but it's just visually not there for the user to see. So that does the similar thing to um, using this prop. There is this loading. Basically, what that does is every time you want to have a spinner or loading text or something for our component children to be ready. So let's say this children need with this text is drives from some sort of API. So let's say we have an API text or something. I don't know. Let's stick with something simple. And the text is children, right? Let's put some ellipses uh, just to showcase that could be like loads of other text. And now let's have this here. So let's replace that with this API text. But obviously, we don't want the user to see an empty component until this piece of text comes from the API. There might be some delays, I don't know, who knows what. So now that prop becomes very handy because you can say loading, and the loading it accepts just a Boolean value, true, false. And we could say if API text is not available, right? So if API text is not available, or API text is uh, actually is empty. Maybe we could be better at some of these conditions. But let's say if the text was empty, or maybe it was undefined, or I don't know, for some reason it didn't return anything, we would show this component, but this middle part will be replaced with a spinner, like, or maybe a loading text, whatever. We have the logic in our core component. So here I can see that loading bit. Where is the loading part? So loading. So loading, I'm not doing anything other than just adding a loading class to the component. But you can go, like, you can literally just do whatever you want to do with it, and like say this is a props that gets passed down here. So this create component. Now this children, you can say if that props, so we can say this like children, we can say if children, if props dot if sorry, not props, if loading, then show maybe loading, if I could spell it right, loading. Otherwise show the assign the children to it, not colon. But yeah, something along the lines um of this. Actually, it's not an object, sorry. Yeah, so it's something along the lines of this. So if loading is true, then show this loading text. If otherwise, show assign the children. to this create element, which is a React helper, built-in helper. So yeah, so it obviously you can go and like add more functionalities to this, but I would suggest not to, because you don't want to end up with it with a very gigantic component. Okay, so that's all done. Don't save. Now we covered element. We now could cover region. Now the region sole purpose is to create region within any other components. So what it does is basically, in a sense, let's say you have a component that's called anything other than a template, because I've been talking about templates pretty much a lot. So let's say you have another component that uses the same logic as to the templating system, but it's not a template system. Maybe let's think of it as a grid. You know how grid, with grids, we have the grid itself, right? We have the grid itself, but we also have for each grid component, we have something called row, and for each row we have column. So if you think about this in your own time and you go through the the region, it basically chains these regions to the component we use it within, right? So if we use this region inside this grid component, what it does is basically anything after this dot, it attaches it to the component we are using it within, and that's what its sole purpose is, and nothing else. And under the hood, this region component basically um, uh, uses a helper method called create region. It also uses element component that we discussed earlier, and it uses a bunch of helper from Lodash, and some built-in React, and obviously some type checking, predefined type checkings, type constants basically. So let's not worry about this, but obviously every time you want to create something um, with this region, you have to excuse me, you have to use it uh, similar to what we have defined in our template. So somewhere here you can see we are importing region, and we are importing element. Element is not used anywhere other than the most outer, right? Most outer is element. And so this is if you think of this as a template, so this is a template, right? So this defines these, right? These low boxes, right? And these colors are driving from the style sheet, right? Just to keep it very simple. Obviously, you need to go and just change this to whatever suits you. For the sake of this tutorial, I have stick with like very bright colors and like obvious colors, just so that you can understand better. Now, if you we have some sort of unused variables, sorry, props. But if you get the idea, basically we are saying region, right? And this region, we are giving it some class names and like the name of that region. This is very important. Reference. So the reference is the children of the parent, right? So this region could look up anything after that dot I was talking about earlier, and the tag. So if you want that region to be let's say a div tag, or maybe a span tag, this is where you assign them. And these HTML tags, if you go to it, you can see it's got all the valid HTML tags in the constant that It's located here. That's located here. Sorry. Yeah, components. Yeah, all of these ones. So aside all of the valid ones, you don't need to change this. I've already validated so many times, and I have. Um, and as a matter of fact, I've been using it yeah, within my other personal projects, and it's been really, really good because I know that it is not, well, to put it this way, you don't need it. You don't need this. You don't need to reference this if you are using a normal div. And I've been using normal div somewhere, like here, like for instance, this div, right? So if you have like very simple use cases, don't go with element component because you're not doing anything in particular that a normal div wouldn't provide you. But if you have some sort of guards or you have something that the element provides you, then go with that element component. Otherwise, stick with whatever JSX gives you. And that's basically it. So that's what the region does, and we have a number of these defined in our template file. So this is a template file, and this element, the most outer wrapper, this is what's called. This is what defines our template. And these little like segments, these little regions are the little blocks in our template file. So the header, main, side, main, footer, right? So to and we have like say we have this region, we have this row. So this is just normal div because we don't need to be we don't need to go crazy. And like we have like one is for this side, one for the main, and one for the footer. Like very simple, very and here, what this does is it change these names. So these names to our parent, to our template file. So when you do, so if we look at the view, so when you do template dot header, that's what that does. It attaches different regions to our template, to our component, to this template component basically. So it's available to you when you want to use it. That's not necessary for JavaScript, but it is necessary for TypeScript because it tells TypeScript that this component has subcomponents within it, and that's what that does. Um, excuse me. Anything other than that is very simple. We are defining our regions here, and we are using some type checkings, and like if you know TypeScript, very straightforward stuff, nothing too crazy. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So these are the two main components, and I created for this tutorial. We have the constants. Obviously, each and every one of these files have its own sole purpose, like the app, all the constants, all the all our app related constants goes here. So like let's say for instance the title, the page title, this like here, like maybe like logo location or something. You can just you know you can break it up and you can break up your app into this file, like all the static bits side of it. So it's easier for you if you wanted to clone the same app for another site of yours. All you need to do is just mess around with these text and like image locations, and you don't need to go into every single file to be able to change something if it kind of makes sense. um, I've been following this kind of logic throughout my entire like personal projects, both personal and professional projects, like when freelancing, and it's been really, really easy to use, easy for the next developer to work on, and I've always had good feedbacks from other developers that this is very intuitive, very straightforward. They don't need to look up the entire like fold, like entire components, different components like children components, to change a piece of text or maybe to alter something. So that's what the purpose of this. Obviously, we have some texts, and again, you don't need to do that. You don't need to have this. You can just hard code them, but I would rather to have them here because it's unless it drives from some sort of API. But most hard coded piece of text goes into this file, and you should just bear that in mind. We have some regex, and it's very straightforward. Um, the index just exports them all out and available from the constants directory. Icons, again, I've just added a logic, but we don't have any icons as of yet. But in the future videos, I will do one. Uh, um, and the components is the one we are consuming a lot, specifically for this video. So that's what the constants does. Helpers, we have multiple helper methods, and the most important one is the join classes and flat and deep and create region. These three. I know we have is client. This is to serve SSR rendering. So basically, if you have a component at that because Next.js, this is a Next.js specific or SSR based specific in a sense. So if you have an app that may render in the server side, because we are using some browser specific objects, let's say window object, um, because they are not available in the Node JS world. We are adding guard around it so that the app uh, the app doesn't crash in a sense. And that's the purpose of this. So if you're a Next.js developer, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you're not and you have no idea, you don't need to worry about this because I'll be doing another video just covering this in a greater detail. Okay, so let's get started with the join classes. Join classes is nothing but a simple helper method that basically treats all arguments, right, as an array, and basically it flattens, like literally flattens a very deeply nested, any deeply nested array into a single array, like to the most outer array, right? So if you have an array, let's say you have this array, you have another array, you have another array, you have another array, and you have, I don't know, some class name, so some class name here, and let's copy this text. I don't want to be copying it all over the place. You have something here, you have something here, like some strings here. You just have them in a very unpredictable order, and this could be like very deeply nested. You never know, right? But you just want to like um, you know flatten them all as if it was sorry as if it was sorry like this, right? So all of these become available at the very most outer array, right? Regardless, that's what that does. And um, we are doing some type checking, and for the type of this, we are telling it to be treat that as a nested array, so it could be a nested array. And the basically that helper returns as a string. So all of these arrays, so let's say you have an array that this class name, sorry, so let's say we have four, maybe one nested one and another nested one. Yeah, so we have 1 2 3 4 5 6, so we have 6 class names but in a very unpredictable state. Now we want all of these to be in a singular string, right? So we want, sorry. So we want the return class name. So if you were to think of it as in React world, this would become that will return to Yeah, something like that. Obviously from top to bottom in that order. And that's what it does basically. So it just combines them all in one gigantic string base class name. And yep, so that's all about this. Obviously, make sure you dig into it furthermore in your own time. I don't want to create a very long video because so many of you complain about that. Obviously, when we are flattening the array, we want to join it. So we join it using space. So every array followed by space. And this basically replaces, so the regex constant I was talking about, that's one of them. So multiple white space. So basically, if you have multiple class names, but there are some like more than one single space in between them, that's what it sorts those one out, sorry. So if it's class name, sorry, class name, space, 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 class name, space, class name, the very first one that has three spaces, it will just replace those three spaces with just one. And then the trim just trims the very last blank space that may be there. And that's pretty much it about this helper. Obviously, flat and deep. This is a very very most important helper that we are using for specifically. We are using it in a multiple places. So we use that for this join class names. So you can say flat and deep. It's already used within this join, but it's also used in this create region. So make sure you go through it. I've left plenty of comments for you to understand. Obviously, if you don't understand what's happening, if you don't understand what the key and the value is, make sure you console log them in your console. I'll make another video specifically for this. But what this basically does is this is very similar to Lodash, flatten deep method function, but it's slightly different. It may look similar or same on the surface, but it's like deep down, it's very different. And I'll make sure I'll do another video tutorial for this. For time being, don't worry about this. That does exactly as I presented to you a second ago. So, and it's got plenty of comments, and it's very, very easy and not quite gigantic. It's only about 40 or just over 40 lines. So make sure you go with that in your own time. And we have the template. So this is the very most important one. And in our templates, we could have as many as templates we want. So this is, it doesn't have to be default. It can be any name. So we are saying, okay, so we have a template in our template. It's called default, and the default is consumed in our home view. So in the home view, if you go to the index, you can see I have a reference to our template, to our default template. And the reason I've called it, I've referenced it to a template variable, it's because if I was to change the template every time, I I don't need to go and change each and every one of these, template names, right? We don't care about that. You only care about this path, and that would save us so much time. But what you have to do every time you reference a different template, you just have to make sure that these regions are available to that template. So we just go over that in a minute. Um, in the templates, we have one called default. We can have as many as you want, and you consume them in different pages, different views. I'll probably go into more details in a separate video, but for time being, this is good enough to understand the basics, and you can take it. You can obviously try it yourself, because there's nothing better than trying something for yourself. You don't have to just keep watching tutorials. You have to actually trying them in your own time, and like break things and fix things to be able to be a better coder. So default, uh, right. So if you were to create another template for itself, maybe you have something called my three columns template, where maybe try that and just leave a comment saying how you feel about that. Maybe what was your approach and how did you do it? Maybe I would love to hear from you guys. So maybe three column based layout, sorry, columns. It could be maybe column one, column two, and column three, and it could have no header or footer, just three columns, right? And you could consume that somewhere in your maybe main region, right? So in your main region, you can have another maybe called component that handles three column based, but don't go too crazy because I'm gonna have a separate tutorial coming soon, having a very advanced, like implementing a very advanced grid system, right? So I've already implemented for my own side, for my side projects and like personal projects, but I need to tidy it up a bit and clean it up and leave some comments and basically do a tutorial. So wait for that one. But before that, um, you can see where the regions has been used. So we are for this component, so for this template, default template, we're consuming, like we are utilizing element and region, which we have already covered. And these are the props. If you don't know TypeScript, you don't need to uh, touch any of these. But basically, these are our regions. We are telling TypeScript that this 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 default template has number of others like children based subcomponents that's chained into that default. So when you do default, so sorry, when you do template dot aside, if you don't put this, TypeScript going to complain. So that's what that does. Sorry, not this bit. This is the class name part, but this bit. This is what that does basically. And we are using the same props for the children and the component itself. So this props type, this is consumed by this outer wrapper and for each one of them. But if you wanted to have maybe specific props for the parent or the children, sorry, the regions, you could like define them separately. But I'll have to stick with to what is the simplest form for the sake of this tutorial. And apart from these type checkings, there's nothing crazy going on. We are referencing a region here, and we are wrapping the most outer div or container with element component because there is no need for it, because I can see that it's just a single class name. So this could essentially be just a div class name and this, right? But I don't know, for some reason I stick with I changed it with this element component. But you see my point, right? So I could have stick with the same approach as this div, right? And not use element at all in this template. And every region, as I said before, it has like class names, which we can attach multiple class names using arrays, and a name. So you give it the name of this region. So this region, so the name is what's consumed here. So that's the name. So header. So make sure, and these are constants that are located here. So you can see aside, background, banner. And we can see if I was to take out header from here, that would, yeah. It wouldn't complain because we have the TypeScript for it. But if we, but literally the header wouldn't be available anymore because the header is there, but actually we don't have it as part of our constant. So the header is now gone. The color and everything in terms of styling is all there because it's all like within the template itself. It's all like here, but the children wouldn't be available because children we are saying, okay, this children belongs to this region, but actually the header is not there anymore. So how would it know? So basically, that's the job of that. And what else? Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible for you guys to explore more, and furthermore for yourself, because that's the only way you're going to learn. Obviously, leave me your uh, leave me some comments below, and let me know how you find it, what did you do, and whether you were able to create further templates, you know, going and exploring your own way. So thank you very much, and see you in the next one. Bye.